Okay, viewers, this is part 2 of Fox, Kamala Harris.
The most conservative members of the United States Congress to actually strengthen the border. That border bill would have put 1,500 more border agents at the border, which is why I believe the Border Patrol agents supported the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States, which
The border people would take anything at the moment. They're that worn out. They are worn out with the burden that Kamala Harris has put on them with the open borders. The fentanyl problem, well, that's on her, isn't it? Look at the look on her face.
is a scourge affecting people of every background, every
So why didn't she shut the borders with every ounce of power that she had to do it? Why did she ignore the borders?
Geographic location in our country, killing people. It would have allowed us to put more
She knew it was killing people. She knew the immigrants were bringing in massive amounts of these drugs and just left it go.
resources into prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, which I have done as the Attorney General, former Attorney General of a border state.
Madam Vice President.
See, it's like an athlete that's been a great athlete and then turned into a lazy person or a drunk or an addict. Her apparently past accomplishments have got nothing to do with what she's done with that border. She's completely failed.
President, a couple of things.
Prosecuted trafficking of drugs, guns, and human beings. And
Six
Donald Trump,
Democrats-
but let me just finish.
Six
and
Democrats
Donald
voted
Trump
against that bill.
learned about that bill and told them to kill it.
Let's look at what Trump did.
Biden. Why were you against the House, against the Senate border deal, the bipartisan border?
Well, they allow 5,000 people a week. Number one, that, but it also made it much better for the opposing side. I don't know if you've heard this, but I came up with this one: migrant crime. There's crime, there's violent crime, there's migrant crime. We have a new category of crime. It's called migrant crime, and it's going to be worse than any other form of crime.
Continuing on.
All right, News Nation political contributor Chris Hahn, president of the Counterpoint Institute Policy. Shay Bradley Farrell is with us now. Nice to see both of you.
Nice to see you.
Shay, I was thinking this is like Merrick Garland all over again, right?
Well, the Biden administration is the one to blame for what's going on at the border, and Governor Abbott had every right to invoke this clause, every constitutional right to do this. Biden, before he came into office, declared to the world that our borders were open, and I was down there on the border just 2 months after he came into office.
Maybe I understand that that's where the border is and why it's a problem. We've covered it extensively. My question is, if it is such the problem that you lay out, how is it not, I mean, beyond playing politics, it seems pretty shameful to not make a deal to close the border?
Yeah, the deal, we don't need a deal to close the border. President Biden is the one. I was down there 2 months after the border was opened by him, after he got into office. I was talking to federal...
You see, if the president's got the power to open the border, guess what? The president's got the power to close the border. He doesn't need a deal. He never needed a deal. Donald Trump tried to explain that. She could have, Kamala Harris, walked into the White House and signed an order to close the borders, but they wouldn't do it.
Law enforcement and local law enforcement who were being told to let human traffickers out of jail.
This is why everybody hates Washington, right? One party says there's a problem, the other party says there's no problem. They find a way to get a compromise. Finally, there's a compromise. And the other party says, no, we still want the issue. It's your fault, even though for 40 years we haven't been able to have a border security bill in Washington or immigration bill in Washington. In 2013, the same thing happened. Democrats and Republicans got together in the Senate. They passed a border security and immigration reform act that went nowhere in the House because the House Republicans wanted the issue for the election. And Donald Trump is doing the same exact thing right now because it's the only issue he has. He's got no other issue.
Viewers, Donald Trump didn't need an issue at the border. Donald Trump was building the walls at the border. He closed the borders. The Biden-Harris administration opened the borders. Can you see the problem? They're trying to blame Trump. Every way that and corner they get caught in, every mousetrap they have put themselves in, they're saying Donald Trump put it there. They've done it to themselves. Harris and Biden wanted the borders open.
No,
Hold on. I'm going to just say,
This is not a border security bill.
You answered two questions. The fairest show on television. The fairest show on television dictates that we actually are fair about this. This is a compromise. It is a deal to change the parole rules. It's a deal to put more border security. It's a deal to fund Ukraine. Please answer the question.
I'm not sure what funding Ukraine's got to do with it.
How is it acceptable that Republicans won a deal, negotiated a deal, and then as soon as Donald Trump comes in and tells them not to make the deal, they listen to him, who is not currently an elected person?
Well, why should border security be linked to Ukraine? That's the point.
Because that's how Washington works. You compromise with each other to make a deal. It's called give and take. It's called checks and balances. It's called.
I'm not sure this guy's off his head. Why? I picked that up straight away. What's Ukraine got to do with border security? Absolutely nothing.
One party wants this, the other party wants that. How do we make a deal? That's what Donald Trump wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. He should be celebrating this deal, but he's a fraud, just like everybody in the House who's supporting him.
Enough with the name calling. Okay, it's not a fraud, right? It's just it exposes it for what it is. It exposes that he cares more about a general election issue than he does about the border.
A Ukraine aid package does not need to be tied to a border security package. H.R. 2, my organization actually helped pass that through the Senate. It is a comprehensive legislation bill. Border security, we don't need more money going to the border. Border Patrol does need some more money, but what we need to do
I spent 6 years.
You got the first word.
I spent 6 years of my career working in the United States Senate. What belongs in a bill in the Senate is what will get that bill passed. Get done what you want to get done. We want Ukraine. They want border security. Let's make a deal. Here it is. It's working the way it's supposed to be working until that guy gets involved.
I think we made the point. Thank you.
I'm not even a politician, and none of that made sense. And again, Biden and Harris could have signed immediately to close the borders, but they wouldn't do it.
Because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And in this election...
Again, when Donald Trump was in power, he was closing the borders, right? He had a terrific border. If you look at Egypt, just hang on a minute, viewers. This is the extent that Egypt's gone to stop the Palestinians from getting into their land. Just let me remind you, Hamas is the cause of this, not Israel. In some places, the Egyptian border walls are 5 walls thick. Not 1, 5. Look at the size of that wall. You're not climbing up there. Okay. And us silly Westerners are flying these people, these Palestinians, into our countries and sending millions of dollars in aid. They're only sending it to Hamas. They're not sending the Hamas. The money that goes over there is a minority of it's helping the Palestinians. Look at that wall. Now, if Kamala Harris got into office, they and Biden, they came along and started to sell all the stuff that was going into the wall. It's ludicrous.
This is rightly a discussion that the American people want to have. And what they want...
The discussion they want to have, they want to take this woman out. Okay?
Are solutions, and they want a president of the United States who's not playing political games with the issue.
She's bringing in Donald Trump, who is not playing political games, as a what's that called? She's blame shifting it onto Donald Trump when it's got nothing to do with Donald Trump. It was the Biden-Harris administration.
Hear you.
But actually is focused on fixing
Six
it.
Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million.
6 Democrats voted against that bill because it was still going to allow 1.8 million, including Bernie Sanders. It still would have allowed 1.8 million, or approximately something like that, immigrants into the country each year.
Million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had a problem with it. These are the 6 Democrats. But more importantly, back to the original premise. Jocelyn.
Okay, just in the body language of Kamala Harris, it's starting to deteriorate. The head's starting to tilt to the side. She's probably wondering, how did I get into this position? This hasn't happened to her before, as far as we know. Excuse me, in the interview arena. Now she's in the hot seat.
Gary, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley...
She's got that look on her face, and I've seen this with some of my girlfriends. How can you do this to me? Why are you doing this to me? And the fact of the matter is, he's just trying to get some responsibility and accountability from this person. And she is scorning him underneath. Now, in the background, I can guarantee her team would be panicking. This is powerful enough, almost, for her to... This could ruin her presidential opportunity. It's that bad. It's going that bad, and you can see on her face. Watch her body language closely. How are you doing this to me? And she's got those pearl earrings in again.
Probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened...
She just had a look down at his paper. She just looked him down, like as if looking him up and down. I'll play it again.
Probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe the...
She won't accept it. See how she's shaking her head? She's gone into complete repulsion. I want to play that bit again. This is phenomenal. She's rolling the eyes and shaking the head. Please don't do this to me.
This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
She will not accept it, and she doesn't apologize. She's not going to take accountability. Could you imagine trying to have a relationship with this woman?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that.
We don't need her to say that they're tragic cases. These people are being killed. We're past that. We want, and again, I'm in Australia, but this is infuriating. We want answers to the problems, and she hasn't got any.
There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced.
She can, because she's the one that's causing it. If she was really worried about it, she would have those borders completely closed, and she wouldn't be trying to blame anybody else. She's in delusion. She's got a panic going on. She's trying to covertly ask this man to stop, but it's only going to get worse. They've got the fox in the cage.
For a loss that should not have occurred.
Absolutely should not have occurred. So she's just thrown herself under the bus, viewers. She allowed this to happen, and it should not have occurred. Biden and Harris should have continued the border work that Donald Trump started.
So that is true.
Okay, so watch this, viewer. Watch the shake of the head. She's rattled. She's rattled. Watch the shake of the head. I'm going to slow it down. The woman's completely rattled.
Those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true.
It's true. It's true that she's messed up. Now watch the body language.
It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months.
It should never, see, viewers, this is a deception. She's in deception now because the border should have never been in the state that it was put in by Biden and herself. The border was being monitored in a progressive, positive, and constructive way, and they pulled it apart.
That we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock.
We don't need to know all that. We already know that. She has, and guess who's burdened them with this problem? Kamala Harris.
Trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur.
No. Okay, you can see, I'm playing this slow for a reason. You can see the rage, right? You've got to get underneath. It's a fox in a cage, right? There's rage going on underneath. She's just trying to make this up as she goes. She has created the problem.
And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing.
Now look at the, guys, look at the manipulation. She's risen up like a cobra, ready to strike. Listen to what I'm saying or I'll strike, right? But it's delusion. Again, she's trying to share in a delusion. Now, I'm going to go to J.D. Vance, who said something very significant about Kamala Harris, and I don't think he was being unfair when he said it, because what we're looking at here is a pathological liar, right? And she's got the gall to do it in front of the world.
He's talking about Patty Morin, whose daughter Rachel, 37 years old, when she was murdered by a migrant in the country illegally, said the pain never goes away.
Yeah, let's bring in Senator J.D. Vance from the great state of Ohio, also a vice presidential candidate with Donald Trump. Good morning to you.
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Good morning. We're doing well. You heard that interview. It's just gut-wrenching to know that was preventable. And it happened after they did away with the wall, after they decided to end Remain in Mexico. What's your reaction?
Well, first of all, of course, our heart goes out to Patty Morin and all the people who have lost their lives because of illegal immigrant crime. But we don't just need sympathies for these victims. We need to change the policy so that it doesn't happen to the next American family or the next innocent American girl. And what I heard from Kamala Harris last night was look, this is not, these girls, you know, Jocelyn Nungry and Laken Riley, and of course, Patty's daughter, are not dead because of some accident or some force of nature. They're dead because Kamala Harris opened the border and let their killers into our country to go after their daughters. They don't just need our sympathy. They don't just need our kind words, though they certainly deserve that. They need leadership who actually puts the security of this country first. And unfortunately, they're just not getting that from Kamala Harris. You know, guys, the thing that I found just so bizarre about Kamala Harris's entire interview, 25 minutes of a person who couldn't answer a direct question. How many illegal immigrants have come in? She didn't answer that question. What are we turning the page on? She goes and talks about Donald Trump, who of course hasn't been in office for the past 3.5 years. Kamala Harris has been. What I saw as a person who not just didn't have the skill to navigate a tough interview, but doesn't know how to explain her record, because her record is not possible to explain away to the American people. And so she dipped and dodged questions for 25 minutes. That's not leadership, and that's not contrition. And I think the American people would like to see from their vice president an acknowledgement that she screwed up. It's why we have so many of these problems. Real leadership would be promising a new course and acknowledging while the old course didn't work.
So, Senator, if we could just stay on immigration a little bit, because one thing I noticed in that interview is that there's a fundamental misunderstanding between changing the laws when it comes to immigration reform and border security. And it seems like they feel like it's one of the other. So I guess my question is, how do you guys highlight that on the campaign trail? Because you saw in the interview with Bret Baier, she continued to say, well, we proposed the bill, but of course that bill had no border security measures there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So first of all, you go back to the original days of the Biden-Harris administration and 94 executive orders when Kamala Harris became border czar that had the intended purpose and had the effect of opening the American southern border. That's ending Donald Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. That's stopping construction of the border wall. That's a whole host of things that basically threw open the floodgates. Now, they want to pull this bait and switch where they say, yes, we opened the border for 3 years, but if Congress had bailed us out 3 years later, that somehow was going to make the original 3 years of our open border better. And the problem even there is that the congressional law, I was there when that border bill was being negotiated, it wouldn't have secured the border. It would have allowed 2 million people to come into our country illegally every single day, and it would have permanently implemented this catch and release policy that the Kamala Harris administration.
Just a correction, I think he meant the 2 million every single year.
Put in place. If you have catch and release, where basically you have an illegal immigrant come in and we let them float around in our country for 10 or 15 years where they're waiting for a court date, you're never going to have real border security. So I would like her to just acknowledge they came in saying they were going to open the border. They came in saying they were going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. They did that. The predictable consequences ensued. Admit it. Admit that you guys screwed up and change course. Don't blame it on Congress because you guys refuse to do your job.
Senator, we were joking earlier that if somebody was playing a drinking game where every time she said the name Donald Trump, 10 minutes in, you would be completely toasted, because every time he asked a question about her or the Biden administration, she talked about Donald Trump. One of the things she had to do last night was she had to clean up the mess she made last week on The View and then on the Stephen Colbert Show, where when asked, so what would you do differently in a Kamala Harris administration? And she goes, then nothing comes to mind. Brett wanted to make sure that she actually felt that way, or did she have a different answer? Well, as it turns out, she has a different answer. Listen to this.
Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. So what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we have been burdened with the...
Did you see how she shrunk back? She shrunk back at the start of that reply. We'll come to that later. This is a little bit off topic, but I want you to see how J.D. Vance sums up the psychology of this woman. It'll come up shortly. But this woman, she's going to blame Trump again, I'd say.
The kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country.
No, it hasn't. This is the divisiveness and the evil of this woman. She's got the gall to speak like this in front of the world about a man who really is not what they've portrayed him to be.
And have Americans literally point fingers at each other.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is
tell
about
pollsters,
turning the page on rhetoric that people are
No, Donald Trump's rhetoric is not affecting people anywhere near the extent that this woman's portraying.
Frankly exhausted of Brett.
You've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding.
See, that's like when they asked her the question, you haven't been to the border. And she goes, I haven't been to, somewhere else either. This woman is very clever, but also very stupid, because anybody that's awake can tell that she's a liar and evasive, a blame shifter, and unaccountable and irresponsible, which is a very dangerous person.
In the office.
Come on.
Yeah, come on. I heard 2 or 3 times for a drink during that one particular answer. So what she did is essentially, because Joe Biden is deeply unpopular right now, Senator, is she declared her independence from him and said her administration would not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. Do you believe that?
No, not at all, Steve. I mean, look, the entire theme of her campaign is that she hasn't even met the person that's the president, even though she's his sitting vice president and ran along the ticket with him. She is, of course, the deciding vote in trillions of dollars of Joe Biden's spending. She bragged about being the last person in the room when major decisions were made. But we have to sort of step back and appreciate there is something pathological going on here. She has been in power for 3.5 years. She bragged about being the last person in the room when major decisions were made. But we have to sort of step back and appreciate there is something pathological going on here. She has been in power for 3.5 years. And when asked about how she would be different, she goes and talks about Donald Trump.
There's definitely something pathological. That's what I wanted to point out to you. He's not saying she's insane or unstable or anything like that, but just as a theologist, I can tell there is definitely something pathological and desperate and unhinged and evil about Kamala Harris.
A problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election.
The problem that she's saying that she's trying to fix, even if it's not to her advantage, is the problem that she's caused that's probably going to take away her opportunity to go any further towards the presidential position. If she becomes president of the United States, there's definitely something wrong in the minds. There's just people would have to be blind.
Because there was a solution, Brett.
The solution was in motion in the administration of Donald Trump, and she undone it with President Biden. I'll catch you on the next session. Bye for now.